Today I'm going to be painting this little beach tropical scene in Procreate on an iPad. I start off by chopping the painting into two. Make sure the horizon line isn't right in the center. Above or below is fine. And I have two layers for the sky and the sea below. I'll have many layers, pretty much one layer per big aspect. So I'm working on the mountains in the background right now and making sure the value is right so it's not too dark or too light. And what I'm trying to do first of all is put in some big shapes where all the major points are, and I try to make sure that the colors I use are very dark because I'm going to lighten them up over the top of these, so I need to make sure I have the darkest dark there could be, because adding dark later is quite difficult. If not impossible, you'll have to start again. So make sure if you do this, it's very dark. You can be very loose with the shapes. We can tidy shapes up later. You just want a rough idea of what they're going to be. With the clouds now, make sure that you start dark again, but obviously clouds are quite a bit lighter, so even the dark clouds they're still quite light. You'll see me adjusting them later, so don't worry about if you get it too accurate. So on the water, I do a few layers and drop the opacity of the same color a few times. What that's going to do is it's going to make it look like the water's above the sand. So you can do that as many times as you want and drop the opacity, and it'll just look like you have some transparency going on. And I use Gaussian blur quite a lot, so you'll notice me flip into the menu now and again. That's a nice way to make smooth shapes. So with the clouds, I think I got about 3 different values in there. So it's dark to light, and clouds in this one, and quite often in this simple setup, they're usually kind of pinkish. So it's hard to tell, but these are red colors, just very unsaturated and light. So stick around in the red colors, but go very light. So once I've got these big shapes in, like the clouds and the sand, etc., and the rocks, I break them up, making sure to highlight where the sun's coming from. So the sun's coming from the top right. So whenever I'm highlighting now, I just make sure that it's consistent and coming from the same place. I don't overdo the detail in this painting, so it's quite simple. And we're onto the little foam parts where the water hits the sand. Now, in real life, this would be very detailed, but I try and simplify things and try and make it look a bit more stylized. So I don't go overboard here. Just, again, the shapes are important. So just try to make sure you make definite shapes rather than messy. So I'm adding a little bit of detail, a bit more than usual. Any brush will do in this case. I think it's a technical studio pen, but any hard brush will do. Again, I'm back to breaking up the shapes and highlighting. As you can see, sometimes I get the color wrong, or most of the time I get the color wrong when I do the highlights, and then I'll change it before I commit the shapes. Now, earlier you saw me put these palm tree leaves in. I made sure I made them too big on purpose because I knew I was going to raise parts, so it adds a lot of detail without really doing that much. So one thing to be conscious of is that I try to make sure all the shapes are different. Easier said than done, because you'll try and create the same shapes often, but with practice you can make sure the shapes are different. And if not, just go back and if your shapes are similar, then just go back over it and do the shape again. Just erase the shape and do it again. So the concept's the same now. I'm breaking up shapes with highlights, basically. So wherever the sun might hit something, I'll put highlights. I'm not too concerned about the colors. I just make sure they're brighter. And then what's underneath. And make sure you leave lots of dark areas. And then that will look like the sun is shining nicely and hitting certain parts of the landscape. If you have too many highlights, it doesn't look very bright. So you have to have a nice mix of dark and light. So now I'm just finishing off with a bunch of little highlights using that studio pen, adding a bit of detail here and there, but nothing that important. This is kind of optional. So that's about it. If you like this, give me a sub and a like, and I'll see you in the next one.